Personally, I think that one of the main challenges that we face when we receive Buddhist teachings and bring them in our environment, the challenge are words. Because in the original context, specifically in Tibetan language, when we translate, we often use words which are existing in our language, but they don't have the same meaning as in the original language. So today I'd like to start from this concept that we have this challenge. So the word fear. There's a part where it said Tara liberates from 8 fears. If any of you want to check the Tara Gompa upstairs in the center, there's the Tara statue. And behind there's the image of Lama Michel Rinpoche. Then around are the 21 Taras. And above are the 8 Taras liberating from the 8 fears. You can understand that because on a side, downstairs, there's a symbol of each of the 8 fears. The river, the fire, chains, lion, and so on. These are the various symbols representing the 8 fears. So the 8 fears are symbolized as a metaphor. So fear of the current of the river represents the unlimited desire, whilst the fire represents anger, and so on. Lion represents arrogance. So each, the thief represents the doubt, uncertainty. But when we speak about fear and use the expression getting liberating from fear, in our language, when we say I need to get freed from fear, we intend getting free from the object of fear, of the sensation of fear. We mean the sensation of fear. So in Tibetan, this is not the same. To get liberated from the fear of fire, first I need to make sure there's no fire around me. So to get liberated from the fear of fire, I can imagine how it would be if the fire wasn't there. I don't want a fire to happen, to be there. So what I do my best to make sure there's no fire. When I'm so sure about the fact that there's no fire, then I am freed from the fear of fire. So we have all the anti-fire system. It's good to have that. We have 2 systems, automatic system on each side of the Gompa. But when we talk about fear, this is also a healthy feeling, because I recognize that something could harm me. I do not want to suffer, so I will do my best to avoid what could cause harm and suffering to me. And this is very important. If I'm not able to recognize what can harm me and I try to avoid what would make me suffer, I would never be able to do prevention. I would only react in front of everything that happens. But being able to imagine something that could harm me helps me to prevent that, and it's a healthy feeling. When I'm stuck in the paranoia, anxiety, that's another situation. But when we talk about fears, It's not the fear itself as a feeling of fear, which is not good, but the awareness that this is not good and I need to avoid it is a healthy thing. So when we talk about the 8 fears, for example, the fear of fire, of the current of the river, so when I need to cross the river and I see there is a strong current, I will not swim or walk in the river. I will fear the danger and I will make sure I will cross the river safely. So when we talk about avoiding and eliminating fears, this is not only about an inner state, but it's also about recognizing the danger and being able to eliminate that danger and avoid it. So these dangers are quite easy to be recognized as dangers. There's fear of being imprisoned. No one wants to go to jail. If I need to imagine myself in jail, would I feel relaxed or would I fear that fire or being overwhelmed by a huge current? These are all symbols representing something that I want to avoid. On the other side, they are represented as inner states which effectively harm us. But it is important for us, on some level, to fear them. Fear, not intended as a feeling of anxiety, but being able to recognize something as dangerous that I need to avoid. So the example of fire would represent hate, anger. Current would represent being taken over by unlimited desire. The thief is our uncertainties, doubts, not being able to make sure whether something is there or isn't. And another fear is the fear of lion, which represents fear of arrogance. So, first of all, we tend to see our inner states, which are harmful, as we were a victim. I do not want to feel arrogance, attachment, anger, or other. But look at what's happening, look at what this person did to me, look at what the other person said. If it wasn't like that, I will bring an extreme example, which sometimes, very often actually, happens that a person acts violently towards a woman because cannot withhold his desire, and then the question asked to the woman, how were you dressed? Like if the man was a victim and couldn't withhold his instincts because the fault was on how the woman was dressed. So he was the victim, he is the victim. 3 slaps to this man. But besides this example, we do tend to live our lives like emotions and inner states like if we were victims of the situation. After a while, we follow Buddhism. We even feel guilty when feeling this kind of feelings. We feel we should act as a good Buddhist, so if I feel this, it cannot be completely entirely my fault. This is a trial because this is happening outwardly. So often we tend to act like if this attitude we have was triggered by something external, would not depend on us completely. But it is important to recognize that these emotions, these attitudes, these inner states, once they're present, they create damage. Let's try to go back to our choices in the past based upon these feelings on a long and short term. And let's try to analyze if they harmed us or if they benefited us. And here it is up to you. When I observe and see that arrogance, attachment, unlimited attachment, and unlimited desire, hate, anger, doubt, uncertainty, ignorance, and so on, they create harm, they create damage. In the moment I'm taken consciously by arrogance or anger, I look towards tomorrow. I understand I need to avoid this. Absolutely, I do not want to be taken over by these. It's like we have memory of a fire and understand that I cannot relive this experience again. It doesn't matter where it comes from, if I'm the guilty one or not. I cannot have the fire anymore. So similarly, likewise, we need to have clarity about that situation, that attitude, that emotion. I do not want to repeat that. And here we will start a fire prevention work to prevent that this happens again. And among all these objects of fear, some of these are more evident, some are more subtle. One of the most subtle ones is the fear of arrogance, similar to a lion. What is arrogance? Arrogance in Tibetan is a funny name in Tibetan, Nagyal, where Na is I, and Gyal is king or queen. So I am the king, I am the queen. We can also say, I'm the victorious, I'm the best one, I'm the one above, I'm the king and the queen. Na Gyal, me, myself, the queen or the king. This is the name in Tibetan. But this feeling, this attitude, which we name as arrogance or pride, but pride is more connected to self-esteem, so it's something else. I prefer the word arrogance. This starts from an aspect, which is our self-centered vision where we are the center of the universe. I am at the center of everything. So I cannot see any situation without being the main reference. So we start from that. Where there is arrogance, there is the I as the main thing ever happened in the universe. Is in the center of that situation. I am at the center of that, the king and the queen in the middle, right there. Arrogance is a very subtle feeling because sometimes it can mask itself with humbleness. It is masked by humbleness. I refer sometimes to Benigni's sentence. I was listening to the commentary of Roberto Benigni of the Divine Comedy. It was in 13 episodes. It was in Florence, in the main square, the commentary of the Divine Comedy. And there's a moment where Benigni says, humbleness is the most difficult among all virtues, because if you think you have it, then you have already lost it. Arrogance, this kind of arrogance exists. It's defined as the attitude where I compare myself with the other, and in front of the other one, I see something which I consider excellent. It can be an inner quality, an external one, youth, age, any other aspect which I consider as excellent, a good thing, important. So I see that I have that and I use it as a comparison with the other and feeling superior. I'm more intelligent than you. I am more correct than you. I am more beautiful than you. I'm richer, younger, humbler. I'm a better spiritual practitioner than you. I'm more compassionate. Anything that I consider excellent as a good quality and I use it as a comparison point with the other one, and I use it as an aspect which helps me to feel superior compared to the other person. And this is very subtle because it does manifest in many, many ways. For me, one of the worst forms of arrogance is the spiritual arrogance. I'm better than you because I'm a spiritual practitioner and you are not. I'm better than you because I do this kind of practice. We do not say it with wordly, but it somehow passes through us. There is a verse of Buddha which says, Kansa means being. A being cannot make sure about the other person and do it, and doing it, it's a sure cause of degeneration. I don't know who is in front of me. Really, I don't know who the other person is. There's no way I know. And this is something that goes beyond my comprehension capacities. So, judging the other person is short cause of the degeneration of myself. So this spiritual arrogance, where I feel better, I act as I'm superior than the other person. This is very dangerous because sometimes we do, let's bring an example. I do a retreat, I finish a mantra accumulation, I study something, or or read an important book. There, I would consider I consider myself in a higher category. and I will look the other person down. There's a difference which we need to slowly learn to recognize between self-esteem and arrogance. Self-esteem is fundamental, is essential. It does regard ourselves with ourselves. We do recognize with ourselves and celebrate our qualities and good things we have. Wow, this is so good that I'm more patient and I can achieve this and that. I can overcome things and I'm happy about where I could succeed in my own challenges. This is very important. In the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, in this beautiful book of Shantideva, here Shantideva speaks about like if it being it himself against his mental poisons, against anger, talking towards anger in a playful way which seems arrogant, but it is an attitude where I give myself strength against my own attitudes and behaviors, and this helps to nurture self-esteem, recognizing how good what I can do and celebrate and rejoice and recognize our own qualities. But this is a process we do with ourselves. I can compare my I of today with my I of yesterday or 1 week ago and celebrating the achievements. But arrogance is when we use as a reference point the other person. And it's good to see the more we have arrogance, superiority feeling, and in the same quality, the more we have a feeling of inferiority. They go together because we have a need to compare with the other person. I remember once talking to some people. I made a comment about another person saying, look at how beautiful about this person, he will go on retreat soon. And someone said, if I could be financially supported, I would do the same. And I was astonished. The point here is not you. The point is how beautiful is that this other person is going on retreat. We need to rejoice about that. It's not about you. We don't always have to see things through ourselves. Some people say the same about Lama Tsongkhapa, if I had the same conditions. This is a need of always compare ourselves with the other person, because seeing the qualities of the other person kind of lets us down. Among the forms of arrogance, we can see that often arrogance has a consequence, aggressiveness. Justifying our aggressive attitude is also being the owner of truth and being superior in this position of superiority towards other people. I remember once there were some people eating very happily, and this wasn't the most healthy food in the world. Someone else passed by, saw them, not here in Italy, abroad, so that you cannot imagine about the situation. It was someone passing by, saw them eating this kind of unhealthy food, went there and said, "Look, what you're eating is very bad, it's not good." And they were still very happy about what they were eating and said, "Okay, we're just enjoying." And this person got so angry, so furious, treating them aggressively with anger. After that, I said, "What are you doing? Why are you so aggressive?" And it is interesting to see where the aggressive attitude doesn't come from a negative feeling towards the other person, but is related to a feeling of being the owner of truth. It's an arrogance feeling. I need to impose the truth. And when we have this kind of feeling of arrogance, which is another manifestation, which is not comparing ourselves with the other one regarding qualities we think we have and feeling superior, there's another form which is more subtle. And this is being the owner of truth. My perception of truth is the truth, is the correct one. I do not allow myself to see the other person. I'm out of awareness that I live in a reality which is subjective. So my perception of reality is the reality is I am right and you're wrong. In this attitude, there is a difficulty to allow ourselves to see the other person and go towards the other person. Because you are wrong. You have to come towards me, not the opposite. I'm right and you're wrong. This is another form of arrogance which blocks any opportunity to love, blocks the possibility to be compassionate, to be generous, to open towards the other towards the other person. So the feeling of love and compassion require humbleness at the base. In this case, humbleness is living in my own paradigm and you in your own one. I'm not the owner of truth. So I need to breathe, remember that, see the other person and listen to the vision of the other person. As long as I live in this arrogance attitude where I own the truth, when the other person has a different vision, then my tendency is to defend myself. Because difference is a threat. If my experience is reality, whoever has a different perception of it is threatening my certainty. Instead, of course, it is very difficult. Instead, we need to remind ourselves that we live in our own paradigm and the other person in his or her. These days I was thinking about this, and then it was very clear for me after we had the teachings about wisdom and ignorance, where it is very clear that this paradigm is different in the two persons talking to each other. When we are facing another person and we talk, we expect that the other person stays in the same our paradigm. We expect the other person to think like us, to see like us, to perceive things as we do, and the other person has the same. It is normal that we disagree often because we said something different, we heard something different. Of course, it's obvious. We often think we're talking about the same thing, but we are on two different levels. So it is essential to be humble. I'm not the owner of the truth. I live in my own paradigm, and you live in your own. So when I need to communicate with you and I want to transmit something and receive something from you, first of all, I need to allow myself to see you. You are there and you have a different reality compared to mine, different experiences, emotions, education, a physical context. You are another person, and I need to allow myself to get rid of this attitude of imposing and go towards the other person, trying to understand you and see you. Because in communication there are two different things. One is the monologue, where I do not need to communicate, I just want to say something. Have you ever seen that? Sometimes we do not want the other person to understand, we just want to speak. I need to say something. I saw it sometimes, which makes me smile. People discussing something, and at a certain point, they are confronting, and this argument just comes to an end. Everything gets clear, clarified, but some people still haven't said what they think. But what they want to say is similar to what's been said already. And I say, we have already clarified, but the other person says, but I haven't said my point of view. But it doesn't really matter. What is the objective of speaking? That everyone says what they want to say, or that we exchange and we reach a point of agreement? If anyone wants to say something, then we put everyone together, we count up to 3, and then all together they speak, and everyone says what they need to say at the same time. We give 5 minutes so everyone can say what they need to say at the same time. We finished, and then everyone has said what they wanted to say. Do I want to say what I want to say, or do I want to communicate with the other person and reach a point of agreement? These are two different things. Do we want to clarify our ideas, or we just want to say something? Anyway, when we want to communicate, the base of communication is that there's someone transmitting and someone receiving. If I send a message, and this message is in a language that is not comprehensible by the other side, it's like if I didn't send anything. It's like if I started to speak in Tibetan in this moment. I said it. But what does this mean? this is not enough. If I say something, but I don't say it in a language that you do understand, I did speak, but I did not communicate. And in communication, the first thing is to be able to be humble. I put myself at service towards the person listening to me. I need to adapt to the other person. Try to understand that the other person lives another paradigm. And if I want to show you mine, my world vision, I need to use your world vision to explain mine. I need to show you mine through yours. There's no other way. So this need to adapt and get out of our own center requires that we open towards the other person without losing our own entity. Communication is like a bridge between two paradigms. So if we lived in the same world vision, we wouldn't need to communicate, we would be synchronized. We wouldn't need to say something to the other person. But we need to talk and express and manifest towards the other person because we have two different world visions. So we cannot expect that the other person understands us or has the same vision. Our own vision, what we perceive, is not the reality. It is our experience and perception. And the other person has a different one. It's not the autonomous, independent, objective reality. And here there's a base of arrogance. It's also sad that on top, on the peak of the mountain of arrogance, there's no water of teachings, and flowers of realizations don't grow, whilst in the valley of humbleness accumulate the water of teachings and flowers of realization grow. When we face the other person with arrogance, I am better than you, we have zero openness to receive something and learn something from the other person. At the end, this harms ourselves. Instead, it is very important to have an open attitude. See that if I am open, I won't lose anything. I will just gain. Don't be afraid to lose your autonomy, capacity of discernment. We're not talking about putting ourselves in the hands of the other person and losing our own capacity of choice, discernment. We're talking about the capacity to open, to listen and see the other person. Then I will discern if anything makes sense and is coherent. Yes, no, and so on. This is independently on who is in front of me. There's an attitude of certain masters to say absurd things to see if disciples maintain a certain discernment. So sometimes this is done to make sure disciples don't follow with blindfolded eyes. As Buddha said, it's not because I said something that you have to follow or you have to believe. And in the same way, when we buy gold, we need to burn, cut, scratch it to see if it's real gold. I don't think today people do the same in the bank. But we talk about 2,500 years ago in India. There were no certificates. So when people bought gold, had to make sure that it was real gold. That was another material. So they had to scratch, burn, cut to make sure that it was real gold. So let's imagine we go to the market to buy gold. Half kilo of gold. I go, cut, scratch, burn. That's real gold, but I will not buy it. Of course, after you've tried it, you have to buy it. Similarly, Buddha says with the teachings, you have to do the same. Check, make sure, experiment if they are real, coherent, and they work. But once you have tried, made sure, then you have to put them into practice. If instead they are not worthy, you don't have to take them. In my experience, whatever I have not understood in terms of teachings, I put them in a waiting list. Because there are things I'm not ready for. At that moment, I still didn't have the competencies to understand fully, so I put certain things in the waiting list. This is a teaching that I was studying about Buddhist philosophy. And at a certain point, I couldn't understand what this was meant for. It was a complicated study on various types of harats, these realized beings, and when they reach this kind of state and so on, something very complicated, where I asked myself, what do I need this for? I didn't find an answer, so they are still in the waiting list. In general, the more superior we feel, I'm better, I don't listen anything from you, who are you to say certain things, who are you to show me this and that, the more we lose growth opportunities. So, when we have an attitude of not comparing ourselves with the other, and we are able to see the content beyond the box, it's like the old books in Tibetan. This is a tradition that is lost in modern books. But in ancient books, the name of the author was only on the last page of the book, never on the cover. And it's written in a way that is difficult to be understood. In the occasion of the date, and this and that, my name, which is, and blah blah blah. And masters sometimes use different names. I have composed this and that on the request of this person. So it is made in a way that when you read a book, you can judge the book from the content, not from the writer, the author. So this book is written by Lama Tsongkhapa, so it's so beautiful. Of course, I agree, because all books of Lama Tsongkhapa I read are beautiful. Sometimes a bit too picky for me, because Lama Tsongkhapa had this capacity to write on a certain topic, one page to give a concept, and then another 10 pages to explain the reasons and references and other logic reasoning in other 10 pages. And okay, I trust you, I will not dig so far. But Lama Tsongkhapa has always been a wonderful writer, beautiful books. But we should judge a book from the content, not from the cover or the title or the author. Same way, when someone talks to us and we are in front of someone, be careful not to judge driven by a preconcept, because we will close up towards learning, receiving, growing. If we do not compare ourselves with the other person and we are humble, we are not inferior, we just have an attitude of not comparing with the other person. Interesting, because humbleness goes together with self-esteem. Arrogance is the opposite. The more I compare myself with the other person, I feel superior towards you, I feel inferior with another person, so self-esteem goes down. Humbleness instead is an attitude where I do not need to compare myself with the other person to see myself. I have myself as a main reference point. So I rejoice of my own qualities. I look sincerely towards myself where I need to grow, what I need to eliminate. I can use the others as a reference to understand myself better, but not having superiority feelings towards the other person. All this requires a sincere, profound attitude with ourselves. This is one of the main aspects. As I said to my friends, happy if the other person is happy. Happy if I didn't have to die. This means if there wasn't continuity, we could do anything we want. We could do anything on a mundane level that we can do, but this is not enough, because there's much more inside ourselves that we need to live. Life goes by quickly. Often we ask ourselves, who do you want to be when you grow up? The question is, who do I want to be in front of my death? Me with myself. Who do I want to cultivate during life? So what we need to fear, seeing that I cannot allow myself, that is dangerous, is, as written by the Buddha, is arrogance. So let's try to look and see ourselves with ourselves, celebrate our own qualities, so self-esteem, without feeling better or worse than the other person. Everyone has their own path, and I do not have the real means to judge the other person. There are many stories, even recent ones. One, for example, in the Serpent monastery, there was a monk, an old one. One of his nicknames was Dimakara, out of his mind. He wasn't an example of a great practitioner. He was a good person, hardworking person. He was an example of excellence. One day he dies, like it happens to everyone. But he remains in a meditation state, in the clear light. This is understood because the person dies, but the body remains in the chest area in a tepid temperature. It doesn't decompose for a certain time, and this is a clear external sign that shows an inner process which is beautiful, which is the meditation in the clear light, which is one of the most difficult things to achieve at the point of death. And it means this person practiced at a very high level. He was the example of just an average person. He remained in this meditative state, not for 1 day or 24 hours, 48 hours, like it happens often, which is already impressive. He stayed in this meditation state for 3 weeks. And this created a real fuss in the monastery because they were really impressed. No one would expect anything from this person, but he was far beyond everyone else here. And my teacher, Gelapa, he said about something similar when he was a child in Tibet. This is an example that shows us that we never really know who is in front of us. We don't have a real mean to judge who is in front of us. So we need to be humble. An attitude where we do not compare ourselves or we are superior towards another person. Let's remember that once when Genlapala told me, talking about the monastery, there was a specific situation, and he said, whoever works in the monastery in an administrative management role has to have one quality. If this is okay, then beyond that, this person can have more qualities. And this quality is the base quality, is that this person has to give priority to the common good rather than his or her own personal one. Otherwise, any other qualities like intelligence, knowledge, capacity of realization, they will only serve towards his or her own interest instead of the common interest, the common good. And then, of course, there will be the point where the common good will not the same as the personal interest, and there will be conflict. Isn't it right? This is we need to go towards the opposite situation. We have to go against the current. We cannot be normal. It is normal to put our own benefit before, but we have to be abnormal. So first of all comes the common good, then the individual good. Selfishly, we need to think first on the common good. When we speak about the concept of being together, the common good is not only when we work in a public environment. Of course, that is more important, but in the daily life, the other person is part of the common good of the family, of the Sangha, of friends. These are all examples where our own individual good is less important. And being able to recognize this means being mature and humble. So this topic of humbleness and arrogance touches many, many points. And today I wanted to leave one point of reflection, which starts from observing ourselves. Am I selfish or not? In which way? Where? Where we see arrogance manifests, We recognize that we do not want that, we want to avoid that, and we want to do our best with love, affection towards ourselves, recognize that this is not good, and start slowly through our own actions, speech, thoughts, try to avoid certain types of actions. Even in practical things, silly things, where do we sit? Who goes first, who goes second? Very silly things. I see sometimes really fool things. So, let's use today's teaching as a reflection starting point to observe ourselves. In Tibetan, we say pointing the finger towards ourselves, not to put the guilt towards ourselves, but to use it as a self-analysis, self-reflection, and choose a more healthy way to interact with the world. So we will do the dedications.
Lame kutse rapten chi namkar tinle chochur gepadang losan tempe dreme sasum ki drove munsel tatu ne gyur chi kewa kuntu yanda lama dang dralme cheki pela long chi sada lamge yende rapzo ne Dorje change kopa nyur tobo sho nimo dele tsendele nime kuyan delek shin yinsen taktu delek pe kuncho sumki chingi lobo kuncho sumki ngodrubu tsol kuncho sumki trashi shon. All'alba o al tramonto, di notte o durante il giorno, possano i tre gioielli concederci le loro benedizioni, possano aiutarci ad ottenere tutte le realizzazioni e cospargere il sentiero della nostra vita con molti segni di buon auspicio. Buona giornata a tutti.
Brief communication. After tomorrow I'm leaving for the US for 10 days and I will visit Kyabne Trijang Rinpoche. So if anyone wants to send an offer or anything to him, I can bring it to him. So by tomorrow you will prepare it and bring it to the reception and everything will be collected and brought to him. Thank you very much.